Welcome to the Healing Dementia Summit. I'm your host, Dr. Sharon Goldberg, and today I am thrilled to be interviewing Camilla Rees. Camilla Rees is an award-winning health and environmental activist and a leading voice in the movement to raise awareness about the biological and cognitive risks of electromagnetic fields. A former Wall Street executive, she transitioned into health advocacy after personally experiencing the effects of EMF exposure. Today, she is a researcher, author, and consultant for change agents working towards safer technologies. Camilla is the founder of Manhattan Neighbors for Safer Telecommunications, electromagnetichealth.org, Campaign for Radiation-Free Schools, and co-founder of the International EMF Alliance. She serves as senior policy advisor at the National Institute for Science, Law, and Public Policy in Washington, D.C., where she oversees policy papers on EMFs, the smart grid, and telecommunications. Her leadership has been recognized by the American Academy of Environmental Medicine, which awarded her the Jonathan Foreman Award for contributions to environmental medicine, and by the Global Foundation for Integrative Medicine's Public Health Award. You can learn more about Camilla's work at her website, camillarees.com. Camilla, welcome, and thanks so much for coming on the summit.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
It's great to see you. So we're just going to dive right in. You have a lot to tell us. And what I'd really like to know is, how did you go from being a Wall Street executive to becoming a health advocate and researcher in the field of EMF, the health effects of EMF? Could you tell us your story?
Sure. It was due to a lot of bad luck, actually. I was an unlikely activist. I'd never been an activist on anything in my life before. And I started getting symptoms that were turned out to be related to the neighbor's router that they had on the other side of the wall from my pillow. And I didn't know it was there. And over about 2.5 months, I started having great difficulty focusing, concentrating, couldn't open my mail. I was like turning into a zombie. I'd have to go, a couple of blocks away to a local hotel and sit in their dining room and do my to-do list for the day because I couldn't do it where I lived. I couldn't, or I go to Starbucks, even though Starbucks has Wi-Fi, there was something about the apartment, and I had lived there. This was in San Francisco. I lived there for a number of years with no problem. So I knew something had changed. And, bottom line, I got to the bottom of it. And once I realized how important this was over 15 years ago. Once I realized how important the issue was for society, I just dropped everything because I felt an ethical responsibility to learn more and educate other people about these risks because, look at the technology has just, been proliferating, that cell towers, antennas, all kinds of wireless devices. People need to know what can happen to you. And so I got not only focus, concentration, memory. I eventually got, when I'd be lying on the bed, which turned out to be right next to the router on the other side of the wall, I started getting heart irregularities, and I was like, what is this? Never had any heart problems, started getting sleep problems. And then I thought maybe the sleep problems were related to the cognitive difficulties. I've never had either of those before. And then I eventually started getting some neurological problems where my whole body collapsed to the floor and I had to crawl to the phone. I was inches away from a very high power wireless source. Now, most people are just exposed to ambient wireless, not such a high power source right next to their head. But the similar kinds of symptoms are happening to people with chronic exposures to cell phone radiation, wireless, living near a cell tower, now the new smart utility meters that are radiating and putting on people's homes. And people don't know this.
I'm sorry, just to back up a second, can you just tell us what is a smart meter, just so everyone understands?
The old-fashioned utility meters that they used to send somebody out to measure your electricity use. And then eventually they started sending around a truck that they could just connect with the meter from the truck. That saved them some time and money. And now there's a wireless mesh network in neighborhoods that are where it's just automatic. It's just automated continually. And these meters are putting out extremely high pulsations and they are causing very serious problems, very serious problems. Many states you're allowed to opt out for, usually for a fee. Some states you're not, but it's a critical issue that many people don't know about.
Got it. So they're utility meters, basically.
Yeah,
Okay, thanks. And
electricity,
sorry for that interruption, but I thought it was important that everyone knows what we're talking about.
electricity, gas, and water meters are all
Okay,
today.
got it. Okay. So you were really, so I'd like to hear, just I know you told us about how it impacted you, but I'm just wondering how it impacted your daily life, because you were working in finance at the time, right?
Um, I was actually working on a startup company at the time in health education. And the universe showed me this problem that I didn't know existed, and I guess I needed to learn it. And so I couldn't function at all. I had to put everything on hold. I became like a zombie, and I wondered, am I getting dementia? Am I
Mhm.
getting Alzheimer's? I couldn't function, and I was having really strange instincts like, why don't you go sleep across the apartment on the couch? My intuition was telling me to go somewhere else. My intuition actually told me to go sleep in the bath, lie in the bathtub because it was like,
Wow.
and I didn't know, I knew something terrible was happening. And then finally, I'd studied enough health and medicine over the years to know what it was not. And I remember being in a medical conference with Dietrich Klinghardt, and he was talking about electromagnetic exposures years before. And I thought, oh, well, that's never going to happen to me. But I got online, I found a listserv of scientists focused on electromagnetic fields, and I put out a query and I said, can someone tell me how to measure? And Cindy Sage was coming up from Los Angeles to San Francisco the next week for a conference, and she brought a meter, and there it was, clear as day on the meter next to the wall near my pillow. Knocked on the neighbor's door. Hello, do you have a wireless router there? Oh yes, we do. That's our back bedroom. We use it for an office. So, oh my God. I said, can you just turn it off for a minute? I just want to see if I notice a difference. Turned it off. I noticed quite a difference. But to tell you the truth, it took me over a year to fully recover from 2 or 3 months of this high-powered exposure. But I was able to notice a difference then, and I said, the writing was on the wall. I had to move. And they said they were going to Asia for 6 weeks, and they'd turn off the router. So I just, then there was no legal precedent. There was nobody knew anything about this subject. No doctors knew anything about this subject then. Most of them don't today. So I'm so glad that we're doing this program. Yeah. So
Yeah, it's important. And so basically the symptoms came on. You said it was over a 2 month period.
2.5 months, it was slow. It wasn't a sudden thing because I just found myself being less and less productive. The mail was piling up. I was like, what's the matter with you? You're not doing the basic things. I was finding myself having difficulty remembering to take my thyroid medicine that I need to take. I was just incredibly spaced out. And then when I would go, I went to the East Coast to the beach in Rhode Island. I felt much, much better.
Hmm.
And then I went back there, and symptoms were really quite dramatic on re-exposure. I had the first time I ever, I scratched a car in a garage against a pillar. I had never done that in my life before. I one time was to pace. This is before I knew what was going on. I was sort of spaced out, and I drove away from a gas station without pulling the hose out of my car.
Oh, wow.
And so I was not doing well, and thank God I got to the bottom of it.
Yeah, that's incredible that you figured it out so quickly. So,
Well, yeah,
yeah.
you got to be.
So, oh,
That's
sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, you've got to be your own detective. And, one thing I've learned, as I know you understand, is that there are many root sources of imbalance. And if we forget to turn over some of the important stones, we may never get to the root of our problems and then just take a drug. But there are maybe 15 or 20 root sources of imbalance that are related to almost every condition. And the EMFs is a very big, important one.
Got it. So this is what happened to you, but what I want to ask, I know you've been educating people about the health effects of electromagnetic fields for over 15 years at this point. So, well, how common is this? Is this something rare that happened to you, or is this something that's happening to lots of people?
No, it's happening increasingly to people. Back then when it happened to me, that was in the early days of the antenna infrastructure going up in this country. It started around 1990, cell towers going up, and then more antennas and antenna farms, antenna clusters on top of buildings. So today we have more and more and more of these antennas, and they're pursuing a mission of what they call antenna densification, where they want them everywhere. They're going
Mhm.
on utility poles, on lamp posts, right outside people's bedroom windows. And so with and every new generation of technology, like the 5G people have heard a lot about, but every new generation it's the same kind of radiation, but higher pulsations, more complex signaling characteristics, and it's much more biologically disruptive today,
Mhm.
the 5G, but we have 4G as well today, and it's going up into even higher frequencies. So we can expect to see many more people harmed. But right now, surveys show anywhere between, um, let's see, I would say 3 and 10% of the population is pretty seriously impaired. About 35% of people are mildly impaired, like they might get a headache if they're, from a cell phone against the head, just very mildly. They don't think they have a problem. But with more and more devices, the Internet of Things, the new signaling characteristics, we're on a terrible trajectory for human health and for the ecosystem as well.
Got it. So, if someone in our audience is listening, and I'm sure people they're probably thinking, well, how can I tell if I'm being affected by EMFs? What's your advice to them? How can they tell? Is there a way to tell?
Mm. Well, when I figured out what's happening, it was just through like just phenomenologically, like just noticing what was happening, what happened, when I was away from it. You can figure things out on your own. There was a study by Dominique Belpomme in Europe that and another researcher that looked at what is happening, and they called it a neurological pathological disorder. People have been measuring heart rate variability on exposure. I was a co-author on a study years ago on showing the effects on the heart with heart rate variability. And I would say, I think it was 40% of the subjects showed heart irregularities in a blinded study where they didn't know when they were being exposed it was a portable phone radiation. Back then, people had portable phones,
Mhm.
not cell phones so much. So heart rate variability, skin conduction tests, QEEG, brain scans can dramatically show the effect. In fact, I can show you some if you'd like sometime. Of a
Well, actually, and I don't mean to cut you off, but what I'm asking more is like more in a simple way. Like, let's say I'm in an apartment in San Francisco and this starts happening to me or so one of our listeners. Would you recommend that they measure? Like, how could they get a sense? I'm not saying to like make a diagnosis or really prove it, but would measuring help them to figure things out?
Absolutely. I think everybody should have a meter. I mean, there's some communities where they now loan out a meter from the library, like in Massachusetts.
Hmm.
But the meter is the only way to really know what's happening and what directions it's coming from. So if you know what direction it's coming from, you might be able to shield. Like I was in an apartment in Connecticut, and all of a sudden, and I had been fine there for years, and all of a sudden I started getting the same symptoms, bassy, irritable, fatigued, and I thought, what? Something's changed. And I got out my meter, and lo and behold, the levels were really high. And a new neighbor had moved on on the other side of the wall that I had not met. It was a different elevator bank. He ran a business, a talent agency and he had two routers. And so I was able to figure out what was going on in that case. I asked him to, if he would turn it off, hardwire, do the right, say the right thing for him and the rest of us, and he wouldn't do it. So I ended up having to shield, and then with the meter, I could tell what had I effectively shielded, and it dramatically lowered the levels. So meters
So
are
you put something up on the wall. When you say you shielded, you
I
covered the wall with something? Is that?
I did. As outrageous as it sounds, I used a very industrial quality of aluminum foil with aluminum tape down the seams so that nothing would come through. And then we staple gunned this to the wall, and then put sort of beautiful linen fabric, beige linen fabric over it, so nobody really knew what was behind there. But it worked. You learn to,
Hmm.
you know, you just solve your problems when nobody knows at it. And I mean, then nobody really knew what to do. And
Hmm.
then I had another incident where I was in the same building, and many years later, for some reason, they put in wireless transmitters in the ceilings in the hallways. And overnight, I got I couldn't sleep, felt so fried, like I was plugged into an electric outlet. I had a house guest visiting from New Zealand. The same thing happened to her.
Oh.
And so the next day, we were out in a hotel, and I tried to get the building to realize this was a mistake. I got letters from 10 scientists, which I'm happy to share, explaining to them what the risks were, and it wasn't even necessary. They are giving this excuse to buildings around the country now, saying that it's needed for EMT purposes, for emergency personnel. But the truth is that emergency personnel they have two-way radios and dedicated frequencies, and they don't need a building's a transmitter in the hallways of your building. My friend in Greenwich, Connecticut, got a similar letter. My friend in Miami, Florida, in her co-op or condo, they got a letter. They're telling people all over they're putting these transmitters in, and they're absolutely not needed. If people want wireless, they could put a wireless router in. They're not needed. It's very, very disturbing to me, and that plus the cell towers. So yesterday, I was checking out this retirement living community online that a friend of mine said she helped somebody get into, and I was curious about it because it wasn't too far from me. Not that I wasn't wanting to go, but I wanted to check it out. It looked like a beautiful place. Then I see this picture of the retirement community with these trees behind it, and beaming over the retirement community is this big cell tower.
Wow.
It's really disgraceful what is happening, and it's impairing us cognitively, our productivity, our it makes you irritable, stressed, it impairs your relationships as a result. Um, it is exhausting. At the same time that you feel wired, you feel exhausted. Strange, you got both of those things going on at the same time. So it's very important that people learn how to measure and share a meter, but it's really important. And things can change. Things can change suddenly. Where I was living, I made up these router covers to cover routers so that they would block 95% of the exposure when I was visiting somebody.
Hmm.
I thought, oh, what a great idea. I'll sell them at this medical conference I'm going to be speaking at. I'll tell the doctors about it. They'll want them for all their patients. Well, I had a seamstress sewing them up, and lo and behold, the last few ones, I said, wait, I was testing them. It's like, wait a minute, this isn't working. Did you put enough, shielding fabric in there? Did you put the number of layers that I had specified? Did you, yes, I opened it up to be sure, but it turned out that the power on everyone's router had just been turned up, and that was in Colorado. So,
Oh.
they can do this at any time. They can turn up the power on the cell towers. We don't want to live anywhere near a cell tower
Hmm.
or antennas.
Got it. So, with this crazy proliferation of cell towers and wireless infrastructure, it seems like it's everywhere. So, what can people do to protect their health?
Well, there are two tracks. And the first track is to focus on your environment. Don't believe that a little sticker is going to solve your problem. You need to look at the environment, learn the exposures, get that meter, and just minimize these exposures at every opportunity. I mean,
I'm sorry, the sticker, you're talking about some type of like EMF protection
yes,
thing.
yes,
That's
yes. I mean,
okay.
some of them create some little bit of resiliency, but there's no way that they're making you safe. No way. So,
Yeah.
you should show me studies that it's not impacting DNA, and I might change my tune on that. But so you want to hardwire your computer with an Ethernet cord. It's much faster, it's more secure, it's more reliable, it's in weather events, it's safer.
And just explain that so we make sure that everyone understands. When you say hardwiring internet access.
Well, instead of using wireless to access from your computer to access the internet, you run a cable that's called an Ethernet cord, and you can get it at a hardware store or on Amazon.
Mhm.
Run it from the box, the router, to or the cable box. You run it right into your computer, into
Mhm.
one of the ports in your computer. So there's no EMF exposure at all. And so you're not having this radiation blasting your face all day long if you're working at a job and you're on the computer a lot. So that's really, really essential to do. And you have to remember to put it in airplane mode afterwards
Mhm.
and make sure you're still not getting the exposure. But that is critical, to hardwire at every opportunity you can. And then in terms of cell phone use, you don't want to use a cell phone against your head. Absolutely not. If you need to use one, you use it um, intermittently, and you keep it in airplane mode, and then check in with your phone. Don't be continually tethered to it. I mean, there are a lot of reasons not to have that, but you want to minimize your exposure. So that's one way you can do it. Turn it on, see what's going on, send a few texts or emails, turn it off. Um, and don't have this kind of wireless equipment in your home. You know, you don't want your cell phone charging in your bedroom at night. The, there are all kinds of steps that one can take to minimize these exposures. I have my website, manhattanneighbors.org. We have a list of all the different ideas that you can have. If you've got like looking for a new place and you're in New York City or any city, you don't want to live above buildings, above commercial buildings, because they all have wireless, and that's going upstairs. You
Interesting.
want to check your premises, not just what's coming from the wall, that wall or this wall, but you got to see, is something coming from upstairs, something coming from downstairs? What does the meter show you? So if you find situations like that, you can use shielding paints. There's special Y-Shield paints and some other brands. There are shielding fabrics that I like a lot for curtain liners, and they're like nice white linen-like fabric, so they're aesthetically okay. And that helps if you're, from bringing in the radiation outside at night. Um, yeah, so you just got to first become conscious of the problem, and then once you've solved your problem, then it's really important that people start getting engaged in the societal issue that we're facing, in the activism, and because if we just focus on our homes and making ourselves safe, that's not going to get us to where what we need to do. We need to um, restore local authority over the placement of cell towers and antennas on health or environmental grounds. Those rights were taken away by the Telecom Act of 1996. And now there are new FCC rules that are being proposed to take away any last remnant of rights that local governments would have on the grounds like a zoning and aesthetics. And they just want to steamroll over this equipment over this country. And we need people to get involved. So I am involved with a national effort called 704 No More. And it's over 100 health and environmental groups and individuals signing on to support it, to support legal action, legal, legislative, and grassroots advocacy action. We need to rise up and do something about this problem. And that's their two core issues. One is this Section 704 that took away local government's rights. And the other one is the exposure guidelines, the FCC's exposure guidelines. Those two issues are the core issues that need to be addressed and successfully addressed if we are going to, have a chance at a healthy life in this country.
Got it. And you mentioned the FCC exposure guidelines, that is a big problem. So can you just explain that a little bit more? What is the problem? Because everyone thinks that we all assume that we're being protected by the laws, right? Or by the policies.
That's the sad thing, is that people, and I was one of them, I thought, well, if there was something wrong with this, they never would have allowed that tower to go up or that cell phone to be on the market. They just wouldn't have allowed this. The big brother was looking out for us. But in fact, the exposure guidelines industry had a heavy influence in the early years in shaping the exposure guidelines so that they only were designed to protect against thermal effects, heating effects of the radiation. They ignored like at least 4 other types of risk, including the subthermal effects, which are from the pulsations, frequencies, signaling characteristics. And they just completely focused on the thermal effects. So the guidelines, which ultimately were adopted from IEEE, another standard setting, two other standard setting bodies as well. And these people were engineers and they don't have biological background. So they're not biologically based exposure guidelines. They're based on a physics assumption that you need heating in order to cause harm. And that is simply false and misleading. And they have been perpetuating this myth for decades. And yet the U.S. government knows full well that there are risks, because going back to 1971, a review study published by Zori Glaser of the U.S. Navy Medical Research Institute, it reviewed the science up until that point. And there was a lot of science from government and military research before there even was a consumer, cell phone or wireless industry. They reviewed it. 1971, they showed an extraordinary number of biological and health effects and essentially predicted today's chronic illness problem. 23 of the fastest growing chronic illnesses today were in that Navy report. We were warned about them in that Navy report. 23 of the fastest growing diseases today. So the way I see it, this chronic illness problem is being driven to a great degree by the electromagnetic fields. It's not the only factor, but it is an incredibly important factor. And so the exposure guidelines need to be adjusted so that they're biologically based.
Got it.
And there's a lawsuit underway brought by Children's Health Defense and Environmental Health Trust. And the DC Circuit Court came back to them and said to the FCC and said, please come back to the court and explain to us how you could possibly justify the guidelines that you have, given the 11,000 pages of evidence for risk presented in this case to the court. And they highlighted risk to children, environmental effects, and other risks. And so that was 4 years ago. It's now over 4 years, and it's been total silence. The FCC has not responded. What kind of a country is this? So the court did not give them a date by which they had to respond. So they need to give them a date, and that's the next step. And so
got it. And you mentioned, oh, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I wanted to ask though, because you mentioned about that 1971 review by Dr. Glaser at 23 chronic conditions. So, and I know you've published something about chronic conditions recently. So could you just tell us about a few of those? I mean, are these very obscure problems or things or health problems that people are very familiar with and are common nowadays?
Very, very common. Um, Anxiety, headaches, depression, um, neurological problems, sleep problems. I can't remember. I can't recite them all off the top of my head,
No, you
but
don't have to tell us all of them, but these are all documented. You're saying this is documented 50, like 50 plus years ago,
that's
that
correct.
it's old news, basically.
And also, not only did Dr. Glazer document this in his very comprehensive review at the time, but many other ends of the US government have also done reports showing the same thing. NASA,
Mhm.
two reports, EPA, FDA. Actually, there was a letter from the FDA referencing the connection with cancer. The Defense Intelligence Agency, Department of Energy, um, um, I'm trying to remember who that study was done by. It was Nora Volkow, and it was Department of Energy and another U.S. government entity. But anyway, so there is plenty. I have a post about this on my website, and there is plenty of evidence. Our government has known, and they have, and the regulators have known, and they have been willfully ignoring the evidence and enabling this destructive industry to now become it's a $1 trillion industry. It's totally intertwined in our whole economy. It's a major job creator, and this has been enabled because of lack of integrity in our government.
Got it. So, what can people do if someone wants to get involved or do something at the local level in their community, or just to get involved at a national level? What do you recommend for someone who is bothered by hearing this information and wants to take action?
Well, two steps. One, find out if there's a local activist group in your community. When I started, there were only about 6 or 7 people that were activists on this topic. Now there are hundreds of groups, and so they're out there in most states, and get involved locally, but also get involved with the 704 no more.org. And we need volunteers. We need people at the local level. We're at the same time that we're focusing on legal cases and legislative efforts in collaboration with the National Call for Safe Technology, we are trying to build the grassroots movement. And so we would love to have people, sign up, get involved. If you have particular skills that you can share, let us know. We need resources and support it financially. We've got to succeed, and it's going to be because of people who have been harmed, who know how serious the issue is, getting together and just saying, okay, we're going to be a force, and use that people power. And so highly recommend getting involved. Find a local group, get yourself more educated, and get involved with the 704 no more.
Got it. And I know that there are some people out there that are kind of disheartened by the whole situation and think that it's hopeless because there's cell towers everywhere and wireless everywhere. And so, do you have any, I don't know, words of encouragement, or is there a bright side that you're seeing nowadays, or what are your thoughts on that?
Well, the bright side is that more and more people are becoming aware of the issue, so the pressure will mount.
Hmm.
More and more executives are becoming aware of it and understand the whole green building community. They are becoming more conscious. Um, and so it's slow progress. I mean, it took 50 years for cigarettes to be labeled with warnings, 50 years. So we're sort of in a long haul here, but we have to win. Otherwise, we're going to have it's impacting fertility, it's impacting productivity. People are getting it's linked with cancers, 10 or 11 cancers now, I think. People have we need people to rise up and get involved in the activism. That's our hope. That is
Hmm.
what will change things. And financial support for the legal cases.
Got it. And the website is 704, right? The number 704, no more. Nomore.
That's right. And if you live in the Fourth Circuit, we're looking for plaintiffs there. That is North Carolina, South Carolina, Virginia, West Virginia, and Maryland.
Mm-hmm.
So if people know of people who have been injured, whether their health has been injured, their crops have been injured, their cows have been not producing milk, they've suffered any number of injuries like real estate devaluation, aesthetic blight, any injuries in the Fourth Circuit, we'd be interested in talking to people.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Well, we're definitely going to put that link below the video. So when people watch this video, you can see it right now. It'll be beneath the video. So Camilla, thank you so much for joining us on the summit. Is there a question that I didn't ask you that you want to? And actually, you know what? Before I ask you that, I do have one other question that I want to ask related to what you're talking about. So if all of this wireless exposure is leading to this burden of chronic illness, then conversely, if we think about taking it away, do you view that as a kind of lifestyle medicine in for certain people, reducing the exposure?
Absolutely. It is a lifestyle choice to keep your exposures minimal. I don't think we're ever going to get rid of cell phones, and that's not what we're aiming to do. But a lot of the antennas that they're putting up are not needed, and they're really being used for data and AI, and you know, it's so you just make your choices. I made a choice long ago after this happened to me that I don't use a cell phone. I own a cell phone and I have it for emergencies, which might happen at most once a year. When I travel, I do have an iPad and I can turn it on and use Zoom. So I can make a call and then turn it off. That's a choice. I hardwire my computer. That's a choice. I don't stay in hotels that have a cell tower on the roof or across the street. Um, I'm not compulsive about it, but I care about the quality of the environment that I'm in. And yeah, definitely a lifestyle choice, just like choosing the healthy foods, it's a choice. Yeah. To some degree, but these cell towers, these are involuntary exposures, and that's what we need to go after because I think people have the right to do whatever they want personally, but we need to you know it's not right that we're all being blanketed in this radiation. And it's affecting DNA and with potentially grave consequences for future generations, not just
Mhm.
generation. It's affecting
Yeah.
children's learning in schools. We're doing great damage, and it's irresponsible, it's unethical, totally lacking in integrity, and we have to we're in an interesting time now when a lot is coming to the surface. A lot of the corruption in our world in many different industries is starting to come to the surface, percolating. And I love that. And I think this issue will have its time. It's not the low-hanging fruit right now, but I think it will be in the spotlight eventually.
Got it. And it sounds like from what you're saying, there is a lot that people can do, besides, of course, getting involved for those that are able to get involved. Uh, I'll ask you one last thing about getting a meter. So let's say someone wants to get a meter. What do they need to know about that meter? Like, are there particular meters that you recommend, or because just so that they know what they're doing, and so they don't spend too much money, but then they buy something that's not a piece of garbage that is useless. What do you have any
Well,
advice on that?
I had to learn this subject. I didn't take to it easily. And finally someone just said oh, by the way, I bought you a meter and I'm going to send you the bill. I was like, what? You did what? Yeah, you got to learn. You got to learn how to do this. So there are different kinds of meters. There's meters for the Wi-Fi, which is radio frequency radiation. There are meters for electric fields. There are meters for magnetic fields. There are meters for something called dirty electricity, which is high frequency transients that get on the wiring in a house. So to do it comprehensively, to check your home, you really want at least a radio frequency meter. But if you think you have a problem, you might want to hire a building biologist that are trained in all the different meters. And so radio frequency meters, I use an old one, but I also have a Safe and Sound Pro 2, which measures radio frequency. It's also got sound. So you can tell when you're getting closer to something that, that gets louder and louder, that if it's a higher exposure, that's helpful. Sound really helps people to understand the problem because it's an invisible problem.
Mm-hmm.
So people can go to emfsafetystore.com or lessemf.com or safelivingtechnologies.ca in Canada. There are a lot of vendors out there that sell the Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter.
Mm-hmm. Got it. All right. Well, that's great. So is there anything that you want me to ask you that I didn't ask? Or just sort of your final words that you want to leave people with before we sign off?
I think it's incredibly important that you are raising this issue on this summit that you're organizing, because so many doctors they're not aware of this issue. And doctors in New York, where I'm from, where when they ask me for help, some of them take a real interest in it and they want me to go measure their patient's home to see what's going on. And I say, I'll go, but you're coming too, because you got to learn. I make them come and we figure out that the child with, terrible behavioral problems has got a router under the bed or, across the hall in a closet or very high levels in the bedroom, so you got to be a detective, and you don't do it forever, but I think doctors should get out there and with a meter and learn. And that's the only way that people really will appreciate it. Otherwise, it's just sort of like an abstract idea, this invisible exposure. So it's wonderful. It's really wonderful, and particularly related to the dementia. I don't know about Alzheimer's, but the symptoms that I experienced were, I thought I had dementia. I thought my health had significantly declined and that I had dementia. And I wondered if I had Alzheimer's. I didn't know what was happening, but I can tell you right now, I got away from there. I restored my health. It took me over a year doing all the right things to get well, removing myself from the exposure being the most important. And I am totally fine today. So you can recover from bad exposures, but it requires really stepping out into a different environment that doesn't have these energies affecting your regulation systems.
It's incredible to think about because you figured it out and you solved the problem, but then of course it makes me wonder, well, how many people haven't figured it out and are just and are living in that, it is mind-boggling to think about that.
In the US, 5 billion prescriptions are filled every year. 5 billion prescriptions for drugs. So, we worry about drug prices. Well, what about, all these people that are being given drugs for sleep, for depression, for whatever, they're suppressing the symptoms instead of really looking for the underlying root source of imbalance. And this is a big one that needs to be evaluated. I mean, like, I have a friend, she had a neurological problem in her leg. She didn't know what was going over. I come over to her house, and I was in her office, and I said, "What's that to the left of your knee?" And it was like the box of the computer on the router, so many homes I've gone into, like, somebody hadn't been able to sleep in 7 years. Terrible. It was just made her cranky and difficult and unhappy. And I find a router in the wardrobe in her bedroom. I went to visit a guy in New York City. He had throat cancer, and he was in the corner bedroom in this building on West End Avenue. And so I checked that place. I didn't find any problem in the apartment, but he was on the first floor. And so I said, let's go outside. So we went outside, and lo and behold, diagonally across the street, up on top of some like brownstone type buildings, was an antenna farm beaming right at that building. Turns out that 9 out of the 10 people in the building had cancer, and the 10th
Wow.
in the corner bedroom, and the 10th one had just had a miscarriage.
Oh,
Like, I could tell you stories about what has happened to people and how important it is to go looking for these sources of exposure.
yeah. Yeah, it's so important. Well, Camilla Rees, thank you so much for coming on the Healing Dementia Summit and for this incredible interview. The information that you have is just so important. It's so important to get the word out there and for people to understand that this is actually a thing and it's not like, oh, it's not like no problem. It really is causing imbalances in health and health problems, even if people don't feel it. So thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you very much. Thank
Awesome. And to all of our listeners out there, thank you for joining us on the Healing Dementia Summit, and I'll see you in the next interview.